we are down in the feature match area. We have Jesse Robkin playing Jeskai Breeze, and then we have Gerrick playing Azorius Control. Gerrick is somebody, much like Jesse, who plays a lot of our events here, often plays the control decks. And then Jesse, known for innovating on the Jeskai Breach deck, got second place in our championship series here, losing to Roger Suleiman. So we're kind of just going down, the rankings real quick here, sort of seeing how things go. Looks like maybe there's some small problem. Looks like Gerrick maybe didn't sideboard between the last round and is now drawn an opening hand with sideboard cards. So we're going to get a judge involved with that. The common fix these days, Dom, I don't know how much you've been experiencing. I know you've been crushing the Mana Trader series. Is typically these things are called, we'll double check to make sure. Then they will put those cards back into your sideboard and they'll make you redo. So should be a really easy fix here. As it does look like, a Supreme Verdict and Rest in Peace. Those would be two cards to be pretty good to be in Gerrick's opening hand in this matchup.
A much easier fix if it's caught now as opposed to 5 turns in when, at that point, it becomes a lot more complicated. But I believe the fix at this stage is, the judge will come over, will actually fix the deck. We saw Raja say that he hadn't de-sideboarded from his match against Jesse to finish the last time around. So I don't know if this is just a control player issue or what's going on here, but we will get that resolved real quick. In the meantime, we can talk about this Jeskai Breach deck or Jesse Breach. Is that anything? Can we work on that?
No, we call it Jeskai Breach.
Sure. So this is a deck that Jesse has been one of the foremost proponents of, innovators on, and she would know better than either of us, I think. But you've talked to her a lot, both about Magic, about this deck. How does she feel about the matchups against control decks like this?
Yeah, so this is a matchup where she feels like she can win. This is the great part of the Jeskai Breach combo deck, right? You have both the combo and the fair game plan. We see the fair Breach deck players like Zach Allen have been playing that recently, doing really well with it. That deck leans much more on being mana efficient. This deck actually has a combo win, so the control decks have to respect it the whole game, and then your things like Urza's Saga, Ragavan can actually play these real fair games and sort of take over. So Jesse feels pretty good about it. They do have some draws where, they sort of answer everything. They play a Chalice. You can't really get your fair cards going. Maybe they Spreading Seas of Saga. But for the most part, Jesse feels pretty good about this matchup. Not one she would pick to play against every round, but one that she's definitely not that annoyed by. We actually, for our Players' Championship, Jesse expected a bunch of control players and actively chose to play Temur Breach because it was a little better than Jeskai in that sort of field. But one where she was ultimately like, well, if I get it wrong, like if I'm playing Jeskai Breach, it can't be that wrong, right? So
yeah, but then for a more open field like this, more Cascade decks and so on, the white cards maybe have their merits there instead. And Tilman Ragavan is pretty nice start against these control decks. That's an easy way to steal some of those games. I think this also is a type of matchup where experience and skill does really come into it a lot. So if you're against a player of Zach Allen or Roger Suleiman's caliber, that's going to be pretty scary. You're going to have to work hard for those wins. If you're against someone who is less experienced, maybe there will be chances to leverage that in the matchup too.
Yeah, also in that field too, it's important to note that everyone knew Jesse was probably going to play something like Breach, and if not Jesse, there were a lot of other Breach enthusiasts. So anyways, we do see a dress down here at end of turn for Gerrick after getting the Ketria Triumph, the Ragavan Triumph into play there, and then playing at Plains. And we're going to see Emry come down here. It won't get any mill due to the dress down, but you can still sort of cast it off the Bauble here as the Ragavan does hit for 2 and drop Gerrick down a couple life.
Yeah, dress down, not cleanly answering anything, but just stopping the Ragavan from getting extra value, stopping the Emry from milling over cards that you can maybe recast with it. So, and drawing a card in the process. So still a nice use of dress down there. And this is, oh dear, white bordered Teferi Time Raveler here, Mason.
Yeah, that's a white border Japanese Teferi Time Raveler as it's going to come down. And looks like it's going to unsummon something. It could be the Emry, it could be the Ragavan. Depends on what Gerrick's sort of plan is. And it looks like Gerrick is going to target the Emry here. And so it makes a lot of sense. That way the Bauble can't be starting popping off for Jesse as a way to draw cards. And like we mentioned at the start of the round, Dom, Jesse's sort of fair game plan is really good against Gerrick. So Emry with Bauble drawing a couple cards extra each turn is enough to sort of overpower Jesse as the game goes on. So it looks like Jesse's actually going to go face against Gerrick, ignore the Teferi Time Raveler, hits a polluted Delta, and drops Gerrick down to 12.
Yeah, and that treasure also making it a little cheaper to recast the Emry if we're about that. And Teferi for Jesse, black bordered, unfortunately here, but still does all the same things, same text on that card.
Yeah, and this is a huge play for Jesse. Gerrick tapped out to make sure that Emry couldn't run over the game, and one of Jesse's 2 main deck Teferi 3s is in hand. Now Gerrick doesn't have those counter spells that he so often will lean on. He's going to have to maybe tap out to answer the Teferi, which means more counter spells won't be able to get cast. So huge win here for Jesse, sort of on the board here, and Gerrick needs to sort of scramble to answer this card.
Yeah, Teferi against Jessie is kind of a nuisance. She would rather not have to deal with that, but it's fine. Teferi against control deck like Gerrick's, I mean that's a game changer. You have to deal with that, or the game is totally different.
Yeah, we do see a Gyre Sanitarium for turn as we're going to be casting Leyline Binding due to having 4 card types here, thanks to the Triumph. And Gyre Sanitarium Dom, we might be having a Narset Parter Veil situation happening.
Yeah, I know that NRG's owner, George Dubois, is a big proponent of this. We got a few other Narset enjoyers on this circuit locally, and it looks like Gerrick is among them.
Yeah, as we do see Ragavan's going to come in. It looks like this time Jesse is attacking face again, dropping Gerrick down to 10 life. Looks like we hit another land as well. Jesse sort of going in the tank here. Plays Urza Saga for turn, one of her good grindy cards. Dom, if you're Jesse, sort of, how hard do you think it is to like balance the line between getting the combo in play and presenting this fair game plan versus not playing into counter spells? It's a really seems like a hard dynamic for me, but how do you feel like it plays out?
Yeah, you pick your spots carefully. But when you have this big finish to play towards in Underworld Breach or these other high value cards like Teferi, those are the things you want to find a window for. So you will bait out counter spells with anything else if you can work towards resolving those instead. And the nice thing about the card we see here for Jesse in Urza Saga is you kind of don't have to pick that fight. No, yeah, that's a card which dodges most conventional forms of interaction, but then forces them to have several answers or maybe a specific answer like Dress Down.
Yeah, and we did see Jesse here tried to play an Emry. It got counterspelled. Then Jesse used her treasure to Unholy Heat the Teferi. So now Teferi Time Raveler's down. Jesse's going to be able to play at instant speed again. And looks like Gerrick is playing that Narset Parter of Veils. Narset's my favorite walker. Parter of Veils not my favorite card, but pretty impressive here. The static, you can't draw more than 1 card each turn. And then you can -4 to look at the top. Sorry, -2 to look at the top 4 cards of your deck, add a non-creature card to it. And we hit a Leyline Binding for Gerrick. So now Gerrick does have an answer to that Ragavan. And Dom, how does it work with Gyre Sanitarium with Narset?
So Gyre Sanitarium, you can pay to and activate it. Each player draws a card and then discards a card. So if you activate it on their turn after they've drawn a card, they've already drawn, so they don't draw again. They just discard. So this keeps their hand size capped at a certain level. And then the real kicker is if they have an empty hand, they draw their card for the turn in their draw step. You activate it, and now they can't draw again. They discard that card, and so you lock them out of ever casting anything that isn't an instant for the rest of the game. And if you have a Teferi, even those are off limits too.
Yeah, so that is sort of Gerrick's ability to cheese this matchup. Not a lot of players go for this Narset Parter. Like we talked about, George Jabor, someone we've seen on our circuit, he will play this a bunch, but a lot of players, they're sort of divided on if you should play this or not. Like we saw Roger Sullivan last round chose to play green cards instead of playing the Parter of Veils and the Days Undoing instead. So this is a spot where, traditionally Jesse can play forever, but now she has to answer this Narset Parter of Veils.
And that might be easier said than done here. So Saga can start churning out constructs, but Narset has to die in this turn cycle, or a Days Undoing off the top, or other ways to defend it could keep the Narset around and then let it do some real damage.
Yeah. Jesse does have Urza Saga to activate, but we know that Gerrick here has shown us some main deck dress downs. Not sure how many he's playing, but that is a card that's essentially Wrath of God against the Urza construct tokens.
Or, Mason, how about this? What if we just win the game instead?
Oh, Jesse's going for the
combo. How about that?
Yeah, so she's cast Underworld Breach. Now she's going to recast Emry from her graveyard with the 2 mana. She's going to mill 4. So now what happens is Jesse can exile 3 cards from her graveyard to cast a card from her graveyard. So she's going to mill 4. Doesn't really matter what she hits. She's going to hit 3 of them and recast Bauble from her graveyard. She'll then trigger Grinding Station, which will allow her to untap Station. And then Station has the ability of tap, mill target player for 3 cards, sacrifice an artifact. So Jesse's going to do that with Mishra's Bauble. And she's going to do it over and over again. She will eventually find Mox Amber in her deck, and then she'll start doing this with Mox Amber and floating a blue mana. Once that happens, Jesse has the card Thassa's Oracle in her deck, at which point she will be able to Thassa's Oracle, which will win the game if she has no cards in her deck, so she'll mill herself. Gerrick's only out here is to really have the card Solitude. If he has Solitude, he can hit the Emry, but it looks like the players are shortcutting now that Jessie hit the Amber, not her bottom 3 cards. And Gerrick is going to concede. He looked through his deck, saw Jessie Robkin had Thassa's Oracle, and that is why you play Grinding Station. If you're on social media, you saw Jessie sort of talking some smack talk about people won't put a Grinding Station in their deck. This is the reason to play this card. She won on the spot that looked to be almost unwinnable just from hand and got to play only 1 or 2 cards that you're not super happy to register in exchange for having this amazing combo, and won a game that by all accounts she probably loses if she doesn't have that card in her deck.
Yeah, Jessie on record as saying she thinks Breach has the highest card quality on average of any deck in Modern. And the one glaring exception in the eyes of most people is Grinding Station, which is necessary if you want to take this combo route. But as is always the case, you can play the generically good cards, and this deck certainly has a lot of those. And then if you want to build some kind of synergy, some kind of combo, that's going to require cards that maybe are not as good in their own right. But that's a sacrifice you're willing to make for spots like that, where the Fair Breach deck, okay, you play your Breach, you recur a Lightning Bolt, you recur something else, that's fine. Not going to get you out of this overwhelming losing ball position, but sometimes you just flip the switch, you combo off, and you steal a game that looks unwinnable otherwise.
100%. Let's check out Gerrick's sideboard and see what he could have ready for Jessie Robkin here in game number 2. Taking a look at Gerrick's sideboard, we have 3 Veil of Summers, 2 Dovin's Veto, 2 Dress Down, 2 Aether Gust, the Kahira, Rest in Peace, Supreme Verdict, Force Negation, Subtlety, and Chalice of the Void.
Yes, so Rest in Peace definitely I think is going to come in, shutting off the combo, and also diminishing cards like Unholy Heat as well. Dress Down, a great answer to Urza Saga, and just a solid card on the whole as well. And then there's some debate over stuff like Chalice of the Void, where it can be good on 0, can also be good on 1, depending on the game state. And then Supreme Verdict can be good, so can Force Negation, Domin's Veto, which kind of answers to the opposite situations. So a few cards which you want for sure, and then a few which you might add into to make up the numbers.
Yeah, and this is sort of one of the strengths of the Jeskai Breach deck, right? Sideboarding against it, everything is kind of good against Breach, right? Artifact hate good, enchantment hates good, graveyard hates good, creature hates good. But you can't have a cohesive deck and fight over all those cards quite often. So Gerrick needs to pick the right battles. Also, I want to move to Jessie's deck. I just want to point out, I'd argue Gerrick is a Bant control deck. He's playing 3 Veil of Summers. Anyways, on to Jeskai Breach here. Can't stop me now. Jessie's sideboard, she has 2 Aether Gusts, 2 Engineered Explosive, 2 Prismatic Ending, 2 Spell Pierce, a Fury, a Path, a Pithing Needle, a Shadow Spear, a Teferi, Time Raveler, Tormund Script, and 1 Wear Tear. Dom, what do you like from Jessie's sideboard here?
So like the Spell Pierces, like the Teferi, those seem like obvious ones to me. Nothing else really jumps out, and it's unclear what you would cut for those. Maybe some number of Lightning Bolts, Unholy Heats, Prismatic Endings, stuff like that. But for the most part, I think the main deck is going to remain basically the same, and then we sprinkle in, the extra Teferi and some Spell Pierces as well.
Yeah, maybe we'll see Jessie Jitsi Leyline Binding. Maybe she knows that Gerrick here has Chalice of the Void in the sideboard, so we might see Wear Tear as a card that sometimes comes in.
Yep.
Typically, a card you only see when you know they have those cards, so you might see Jessie forego it. She is up a game. She maybe doesn't want to lose having dead cards stuck in her hand. So it's going to be interesting to see how she wants to approach that. Jessie, a known avid sideboarder, loves to bring in the cards. So Jessie here is taking a little tanky as Gerrick is going to be on the play.
The sideboard cards are there to be brought in. They're not just for decoration, not just there to make up the numbers. So yeah, I think using your sideboard wisely is a big part of leveling up as a Magic player. And Jessie has leveled up a lot over the past year or so. Came from relative obscurity to now be one of the biggest names on this circuit, and came oh so close to winning the NRG Championship last time around. I know we'll be very keen to get back there this year.
Yeah, definitely wants, not only showed that, hey, I can do this all the time, but once that Pro Tour invite, Jessie really wants to play the Pro Tour. Like we mentioned, she sort of came up on this circuit here. Last year really blew up, put a lot of time into proving at Magic, went full-time Magic, and has shown to people that, she has what it takes here, as we do see her shocking at Steam events, passing the turn. Big show of strength for Spell Pierce there, as Gerrick's going to fetch up the Ragavan Triumph and pass the turn back to himself.
Yeah, none of this. Oh, I'm actually a Death Shadow deck. No, if you're paying life here, that's either a sacrifice or a sign of something. And this is a matchup where you could actually run that kind of bluff, right? You could just shock Steam Events in untapped and force Gerrick to think about it. But I am sure the threat of Spell Pierce, if Gerrick knows the list or knows what's up, is going to be on his radar.
Yeah, especially, Gerrick plays a lot of these events, probably knows Jesse, and knows that Jesse is an avid spell pierce enjoyer. So it's gonna be something. It's also pretty easy for Gerrick to sort of just invalidate and wait to play around. As we do see a polluted delta for Gerrick in the passing of the turn back, Jesse's gonna end a turn fetch a Sacred Foundry, just sort of develop her mana and make sure she can cast all of her spells.
Yeah, slow starts for both players here. Wonder what Jesse is working towards on turn 3. Maybe something like Teferi, maybe Urza Saga. You don't want to commit to sinking your mana into that ahead of time if you have other stuff to be doing. So we'll see what Jesse has going on.
Yep. As we do see Gerrick here, getting a little cut. And if you're Jesse, is this a turn where how do you sort of play around the counter spells here? Are you going to jam your Teferi sooner than later? You want to play other things? What's sort of your thought process?
So I think if you have several threats, you just start jamming. You make Gerrick have it, and the counterspell problem doesn't really get better, right? If he has counterspell on turn 2, he's going to have it on turn 6, and is in fact more likely to have it once he's been drawing a bunch of cards. So I think if you have a threat, you put him to the test, make him have it. If you have a way to defend it, like a spell piss or something, maybe you wait. But for the meantime, I think you make him have it, depending on what it is.
Mm. Yeah, Gerrick here, untaps with the Zagoth Triumph we just fetched. It's got the Zagoth, the Ragavan, and a Hallowed Fountain, and passes the turn back here after playing Breeding Pool.
Yeah, we got the whole roster of Return to Ravnica block Shocklands there from Jesse Robkin. Really sticking to a theme.
Love those. Second best set of Shocklands. It's my hot take.
That is the Fairy Time Raveler.
Yeah, and we're going to see Force Negation hard cast here. And it looks like Jesse, she's like, hey, I wasn't bluffing the Spell Pierce. I'm going to Spell Pierce. Gets the Teferi down. Minuses immediately. Gets that value just in case there's a Leyline Binding. Knows Gerrick, probably doesn't have anything like a Shark Typhoon right away. As we do see a hard cast Solitude. And this is the power of Teferi Time Raveler.
Yeah, there's nothing that you need to save that -3 ability for, and Teferi could get removed. So yeah, cash it in right now, draw that card right away, get maximum value from it. And Expressive Iteration, one of the best card draw spells, still legal in Modern, is banned in Pioneer, is banned in Legacy on the other side, but in between, Modern is still the safe home for that card.
Yeah. Speaking of safe homes for a card, Expressive Iteration recently banned in Legacy, gone in Pioneer. One of the best cards here in Modern is it's going to find a Bolt for Jesse. That's going to answer the Solitude, and now Jesse just gets more time to make her land drops and work towards both her combo and her fair finish.
Yeah, Jesse almost playing like this weird Jeskai control deck in this game, right? No combo pieces in sight, none of these threats to speak of, but that's perfectly fine. I mean, Jesse's happy to play at this rhythm.
Yeah, it looks like Gerrick is going to play Leyline Binding. That is for 1 mana since, we have both the Zagoth and the Ragavan Triumph. That means we have full domain access. And it looks like Jesse, with the trigger on the stack for Leyline Binding, does have the Wear Tear we talked about. That's going to blow up the Leyline Binding. It won't actually exile the Teferi, so there's no chance for Gerrick to answer it. And Gerrick's going to pick up the Kakira, the Orphan Guard, and just try to find a way to kill this Teferi in multiple turns.
Yeah, ideally, if Jesse had her druthers, she would want to let it get exiled, then destroy it, get it back with more loyalty, but that would give Gerrick the window to defend it. So I think, playing it safe, making sure you can destroy the binding, get it back is the way to go. And another expensive iteration from Jesse. She is iterating so expensively here, Mason. I can't even believe it.
Yeah, she just really loves to express herself, artist. What are you going to do, right? As she does find Ragavan here and ticks up the Teferi Time Raveler and then dashes the Ragavan. Everyone always wonders, can you dash Ragavan or evoke a Fury from Exile? You can. That's alternate casting cost. You can't do it with a Underworld Breach because that is an escape cost, is what you're doing. Just a little fun fact for those at home is Jesse hits a Plains, and then I think that's the secret layer Plains for Tokyo, and then gets a treasure.
Love facts and love fun facts in particular. And it's really nice to get to pair Ragavan with Teferi, knowing that there's no chance it's going to get ambushed by something or run into removal. You know that thing is connecting and going to get a card from their deck.
Yeah, Jesse plays Emry, and of note, hit a Mox Amber. So now Jesse's got, one more of the combo piece. And if she finds the card Grinding Station or Underworld Breach, both of those cards, she will win the game.
And from this position, the graveyard is so stacked that even a fair Underworld Breach is still going to do a lot of damage.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Jesse probably has enough cards and the mana that she can deal 12 damage with Bolt. And so that means she's really close to actually just beating Gerrick here.
That's one way to lock it up. Or you could just bolt the Solitude, cast 2 expensive iterations, and then, and this is a joy of Teferi, bounce your Underworld Breach back to go again next turn.
Yeah, and those sort of lines are like why this deck can be so powerful. We already see Gerrick fetch immediately here. Unsure what he's going to do with the Teferi under there. Maybe he's got some sort of channel land. Maybe there's like a Ganjo situation going on. Looks like he is just going to take the land out of his deck. He wants to make sure to have the Hallowed Fountain. Probably some card Gerrick's playing towards there. And I'm curious.
I've had a lot of times where I just don't fetch, and then the exact land I was going to fetch gets hit by Ragavan, and then I'm kicking myself. So good to get the sequencing right there.
Gerrick hits Prismatic Ending. Jessie gets the second treasure. With her mana base, is actually able to Prismatic Ending for 5, clearing the Solitude. Teferi is still unchecked, and the Ragavan is going to continue to do this dash damage. Leyline Binding comes down for Gerrick again. Jessie only had one Wear Tear in her sideboard, so for her sake, she better not cast another one. As the Teferi does go under binding, Gerrick can finally get access to those counter spells.
I wonder if the Kahira is going to try and jump in front of the Ragavan to prevent that kind of swing from happening again.
Yeah, it got to make you wonder. Gerrick was in a spot where he's like, listen, the top card of my deck, I have so many lands, so many counter spells, they don't matter. Very few cards, and just got a little punished in the hopes of answering Teferi. And now Jessie has played, dashed to Ragavan, looks to be Otawara-ing the Leyline Binding, gets the Teferi, looks to be unsummoning the Kahira. Jessie's going to get to attack in again, and wow. Gerrick is
that one Otawara coming in so clutch. And this is something that happens with these these legendary lands, is so many decks will have the one Otawara, the one Boseiju, and you can't really factor it in too much because it's just a one-off, right? But when it comes up and when it's relevant, it opens up these lines that simply wouldn't be available with a basic island or a basic forest.
Yeah. Looks like Jessie casted Mishra's Bauble, sort of shortcut there. Gerrick showed the top card to Jessie. And now Jessie has this dress down that she can choose to cast at end of turn using the treasure and her last mana. It looks like she is going to let the Ragavan return to her hand and then end of turn dress down. That way, if Gerrick has any sort of weird ETB creature Jessie can't think of, she won't allow that to happen, and she gets to draw a card as well for her troubles.
There is some rules wonkiness around dress down versus dash, and whether that actually works on Magic Online as intended and so on. But so one of the long list of tricky things where dress down is involved.
Yeah, and Gerrick's life total, down to 12 here from all the dashing of Ragavan and the fetching. Really in some trouble when it comes to the life total pressure, and has to answer this Teferi, and then has the Leyline Binding at least to cover that part of the game. But then things like Breach, like we talked about before, can just fair bolt you out of the game from this point. So a lot of pressure from Gerrick from this turn moving forward.
There's the Sanitarium.
Yeah.
Teferi gets bound, and here is Kahira back again, ready for more.
Yep. Jessie's going to give back the dress down to Gerrick. Thank you for your free card draw. She got her Bauble draw too. So she's got a fresh new hand, but still has this Ragavan she can dash if she wants to. And looks like she's going to start with Ledger Shredder. Now Gerrick wants to counter the Ragavan. Jessie's going to at least get some connive. And looks like Jessie's immediately going for Underworld Breach, tapping some of her red mana. It looks like she's not wanting to maybe double bolt this turn, but is going to get the connive. Discards, it looks like maybe an excess Ragavan from her hand. We're going to see a counterspell on the Underworld Breach. That's going to allow Jessie to dash another Ragavan if she wants, or play a Bauble. Jessie gets to look at the top card.
I wonder if Jessie has another Breach left in the tank here, or if that was meant to be the big finish, and Gerrick had the timely counterspell.
Yeah, I wonder. Jessie saw some card last turn. I wonder if it was Gyroid Sanitarium, because we knew the other two cards from the Otawara and then also the Teferi bounce. So it might have been the counterspell was the only thing Jessie didn't know, and she thought she sort of could start running the clock up here, as it were. And she is in this interesting position if she wants to, dash a Ragavan or anything like that. It looks like she doesn't. She's just going to take her draw off Mishra's Bauble and have 2 mana up. And she has cards like Spell Pierce. Gerrick is pretty mana heavy right now, but has Gyroid Sanitarium, so can maybe sort of fix his draw a little bit and find something to do something. Rest in peace, Dom.
Oh, okay. Well, Underworld Breach. Almost don't want Jessie to have one of those now if you're a Jessie Robkin fan.
Yeah, and we got Urza Saga is a good job, and yeah, like we mentioned before, that's sort of all right. We've done all these chip shots. Now our breaches are lethal with either bolts or the combo. No longer the case here, as we do see Jessie looks to be hard casting Underworld Breach. and then is casting Spell Pierce to get some connive action on the Ledger Shredder. Jessie just trying to figure out a way to actually assign lethal damage here, because she now knows, like, hey, I cannot combo. She has her one Wear Tear, which, also is a card to answer Rest in Peace, but it's been used. And yeah, it looks like she's connived away something. I think it was maybe an extra Spell Pierce. It's hard to exactly see here. Players are playing pretty quickly.
You do what you got to do, and sometimes what you got to do is play a dead Underworld Breach and play a dead Counterspell on it just to, loot once.
Oh, and Gerrick has drawn Narset Parter of Veils with the Gyreach Sanitarium in hand. This is going to be a big minus. If he finds a removal spell here, Gerrick is going to be able to start stabilizing against Jessie, as I think he did find Prismatic Ending.
And it's worth noting, Narset excellent against Ledger Shredder. The connive there is not optional. So on Jessie's turn, after she's drawn her card, if she plays 2 spells, she will have to connive, won't draw the extra card, but will have to discard something. So can easily whittle down her hand that way, get her into the position where that Sanitarium can officially lock up the game.
Yeah, and also right now, the Prismatic Ending is the second spell due to Narset being cast. Jessie just actually has to lose the bird, lose the card in hand, and now Gyreach Sanitarium can start activating and just run Jessie out of cards. And it looks like Jessie's going to play another Ledger Shredder and pass the turn, as we are going to see an activation of Gyreach, which is going to make Jessie discard a card. And like you mentioned here, if Gerrick can double spell, Jessie will probably be out of cards for the remainder of the game unless an Urza Saga token can actually answer this Narset Parter of Veils.
Yeah, the Saga does represent a serious threat. Gerrick will have to find an answer to that. But hey, there's Teferi. That qualifies.
Oh, wait, are these white border Narset Parter of Veils that are the War of the Spark ones? I believe they are.
They sure are. And hey, there have been a lot of printings of all of these different Planeswalkers. None of them have come in white border. I can tell you that much.
This is my favorite art on. Oh, I should say this. My second favorite art. Endless Ranks of the Dead is the best. But wow, that one hurts me. The Teferi I'm fine with. No one likes Teferi. But this. Anyways, back to the game at hand. We saw Teferi unsummon the Ledger Shredder. Then it looks like we're going to be seeing an activation of the Urza Construct. Jessie has drawn for turn here. We might see Gerrick activate the Gyreach Sanitarium after the Urza Saga gets triggered to see if Gerrick wants to do that or not, but he's definitely going to activate that at some point here and just run Jessie out of cards in hand.
Yeah, I wonder if Gerrick has a dress down or something like that, because it seemed like the construct or the saga itself might be a more pressing threat than the Ledger Shredder, but otherwise, these constructs, these might be Jessie's best and last hope of winning this game.
Yeah, if she might answer this Narset too, but we know there's another Narset in hand, so she has to sort of set up to answer multiple Narsets, and Gerrick's deck, might be able to just let this one die and then lock up the next one. So we're going to have to see here, as Solitude is hard cast, and this can answer the other one and then move to blocks due to Teferi Time Raveler. Jesse's going to have no constructs left over. This is why we didn't activate Gyreach Sanitarium. We were just going to clean up the board.
That works too, yeah, and Shredder would fly over that, or I guess it could get exiled by Solitude too, but yeah, now we just get it all. And we earlier in this game, Jessie chaining together those expressive iterations, connecting with Ragavan, the Otawara, just with the Teferi. See, like Jessie had everything going according to plan, and now after all of that, Gerrick is now in this commanding position.
Yeah, and this is the thing that can sometimes happen, right? Is you draw maybe part of your deck that isn't working anymore, like the Spell Pierces and the Underworld Breaches, and Jessie was able to convert those into a new draw step, which was pivotal, but they can sort of fall off as the game gets in these weird hate pieces turns. And if Jessie tries to play the fair game, which it was kind of the role she was given, right? The Wear Tear made sense at the time, but now she's just sort of, under the gun of this Rest in Peace and can't really get out from underneath it. So she has to play Fair Magic, which is what Gerrick's here to play. As we do see a new Narset Parter of Veils get cast and immediately down-ticked.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at Gerrick's deck here. 4 Narset Parter of Veils. 2 Jace the Mind Sculptor. This is the era we live in.
Yeah, this is by no means a stock build of Blue Eye Control, but this approach certainly has its fans. We see George DeBoer advocating for this deck a lot, and when it goes off, when you get to do the thing, it looks very impressive and very appealing. Watching this, I want to be a control gamer now.
Yeah, agreed. As we do, Gerrick finds Aether Gust. Jessie did play an Urza Saga last turn. That is going to be big. That is something that can actually allow her to fight through. We just saw how much work it took to answer those 2 constructs. It was 1 card, but we're going to need another card like that, as Ledger Shredder is going to move to combat and attack. And it looks like Gerrick maybe has an answer spell for the Ledger Shredder. Surprised that we didn't. Oh, it looks like we're activate Gyrate Sanitarium. Jesse just has to discard. Gerrick does get to loot. Looks like Gerrick is discarding the Aether Gust since, Underworld Breach, not really a card he's going to be worried about anymore. And it looks like Leyline Binding is the move here. So now the Teferi keeps its loyalty, as does the Narset. As Jesse does cast a Ragavan. And you see, I love the player camps. We can sort of see what's going on with the non-verbal here. Jesse, we saw her lean over. She knows she needs to win the match if she wants to top 8 this tournament. The time is a factor, and she knows she can get locked out very quickly. So we're probably going to see Jesse, if these last 3 creatures, the 2 construct tokens and this Ragavan, get answered before the Narset part of Veil does, we might see Jesse just concede for the sake of, I got to win game 3.
And this is one of those frustrating positions against the control deck where you're maybe single-digit percentage in terms of being able to win this game, but you kind of got to stick it out and try and realize that equity. So Jesse bravely soldiering on probably doesn't feel too optimistic, although, again, if you get the 2 constructs, you get the full value from the Saga, maybe, like if Gerrick just has nothing, but it's going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah, it is. Jesse's Mishra's Baubles also, this has been a pretty heads up from her. We didn't mention it before. It's a way for her to draw a card on Gerrick's turn to try and have a chance of having some semblance of a hand against the Narset part of Veils and Gyrate Sanitarium block. So that's why Jesse keeps grabbing the Mishra's Bauble. She's sort of buffing up her constructs and then also having one more turn before she gets fully locked out of the game. And that is what winning typically means, is we see Jesse actually gets to keep her card in hand. Gerrick didn't want to respond, so now Grinding Station hits the board. That means we have more power. And it looks like
sometimes Grinding Station is the combo piece that lets you go off on turn 3, and sometimes it's +1/+1 to my constructs. Have at it.
And what more can you ask? As we do see a little attack, Deepu, as Gyrate Sanitarium is going to get activated now. Looks like Jesse did have a card in hand still. So, the cool thing about the player camps is we get to see the players. The bad part is we don't get to see their hands as much because players play it pretty close to the chest. But it does look like Jesse has at least 1 card left in hand. And the Mishra probably have another one. Looks like Otawara was used to answer one of the construct tokens. And Jesse's going to pop the Mishra's Bauble at the end of turn. That way she can sort of get going there. And, Gerrick could activate Gyrate Sanitarium on his main phase if he doesn't have anything good and sort of punish the Bauble draw. But ultimately, Jesse will get some card out of all of this.
Looks like, is that... Okay, just bouncing, using the Teferi activation to eat the final construct. Jesse going to sacrifice that to the Grinding Station, fizzling the ability, so Gerrick won't draw a card from that. But at this point, priority is just cleaning that up. I think Gerrick will be happy to have all of that dealt with.
Yeah, it looks like Gerrick casting Days Undoing. That is a oldie but a goodie. That is 3 mana, shuffle your hand and graveyard into your deck, draw 7 new cards, end the turn. With Narset Part of Veils, that is going to be a situation where Jesse will not get to draw extra cards here. We'll sometimes see players do this on the upkeep. In the draw step of another player's turn. That way they draw 0 cards. They draw for turn, and then thanks to Teferi, you can cast it then. Looks like Gerrick's going to have his mana up just in case Jesse has some weird card in hand that, maybe channel or do something. Gerrick just wants to be ready to go. And it looks like Jesse's taking a peek at what Gerrick's exile is. Might be a situation where Jesse's getting ready to concede if the draw step isn't good and just wants to see, okay, did I see anything that changes the way I want to sideboard for game 3?
And now this is the hard lock, thanks to Narset, Gyrate Sanitarium, Days Undoing, going to empty Jesse's hand. And so, yeah, we are in garbage time, as some people say.
Oh, okay. So I realized what happened. I think Gerrick passed the turn and then said in the draw step Days Undoing. And since Jesse there was a Teferi in play, Jesse just picked her card up real quick and this didn't matter until they resolved it. So that's what happened. Gerrick did seem to do that instant speed. A little bit sometimes hard for us to follow the non-verbal shortcuts that can happen, especially like I mentioned with control decks before, both players want to win the round. So sometimes they'll say things like, I'm going to cast this in your draw step. And since there's Teferi in play, Jesse knows there's nothing that she can do to stop it. So it's just, sort of a nicety and a way to speed things up.
Yeah, Jace is a win condition. Going to take a while to get there, but at this point, you can get through those turns very swiftly, take up Jace, and then doing the math, so 3 to 5 to 7, you get up to 12, or get up to 13, you get to -12, and then finally, after that, the game will be officially locked up here.
Yeah, and Jesse's sort of forcing Gerrick to do it here. Looks like Jesse maybe thinks she has some cards now. Maybe she thinks Gerrick's missed some Gaia Root Sanitariums or might. Unsure. She might also just think like, hey, I want to see more of Gerrick's deck here. I don't know. This is such a unique deck, Like we talked about, Narset Part of Veil's not a commonly played card in Modern. So Jesse might just be wanting to see the connives and see like, okay, right there, Gerrick discarded Chalice of the Void. Now Jesse knows Chalice of the Void is in Gerrick's deck. That's a card she can play around, even if she could maybe assume such.
The board they're getting very cluttered for Gerrick between Leyline Bindings and the cards under the Leyline Binding and 3 different Planeswalkers, and we've got whatever that token is on the left. There's a lot going on.
That's the companion token. Do you see that's where you put your companion?
Oh, okay.
8 minutes in round. Jesse seems to have somehow gotten a draw step. I guess Gerrick missed an activation of the Sanitarium, but had a counter spell. So Jesse's going to pack it up here, and you got to turn everyone's permanents to everybody in 8 minutes in the round. This is a heavy favorite for Jesse Robkin, where her deck can actually win in time. But we're going to come back to the booth here real quick. But worth noting, Dom, like we talked about, Gerrick's deck does have the ability to actually steal a win, right? If Gerrick can slam something like a Narset into a Day's Undoing, he can get into the position we just saw very quickly. And Jesse, even though she might be the favorite at winning in 8 minutes, might not actually have the time to win or the materials to win.
We might see Solitude attacking, getting into the red zone very quickly for 6 turns in a row, or whatever it takes to finally close out the game. So yeah, we go into a game 3, both players under a time crunch of sorts. Again, Jesse's deck able to win on turn 3 at the earliest, can also win a fair game with Ragavans and Shredders and so on, as the Saga tokens as well. A little harder for Gerrick. We've seen control decks in the past that have just some big creature, right, that they can board in as a win condition. Nothing quite like that here. You do have to work for it a little harder, but I am sure Gerrick will give it his best shot.
Yeah, and if you're excited by these decks and you're enjoying these matches, make sure to click the follow button right now. That way you don't miss any more of the matches this weekend or the rest of the year. We're doing this series all year long. So get excited for more awesome matchups there. Also, if you want to pick up some of these cards like we talked about, you can go to nerdragegaming.com. We have all the cards that you're going to need there, and you can play these decks. If you're loving this Jeskai Breach deck from Jesse, or you want to be the monster and lock people out like Gerrick is doing, you can do that as well. Pick up the cards there. We also have more events coming, as it looks like we're going to actually come down to feature match here. The players have got done quickly sideboarding. No more shilling from me, as it looks like Jesse has a hand of lands and spells, but doesn't look like just what she wanted. So she's just going to quickly mulligan. Knows that time is important.
Yeah, 9 rounds a day, plenty of time for shilling throughout the rest of the tournament here. But for now, we got some magic to get to. Or maybe we got some little shilling we can fit in as Jesse goes down to 6.
That's right. Well, Dom, if you enjoy this and you're willing to play the next one, the next one's going to be in Minneapolis. That's going to be in May. So that's the same place that the Pro Tour is going to be. We're going to be there doing one of our events. Yep, Minneapolis, May 20th through the 21st. We have a Pioneer 10K. That's the one that's going to get you straight to their championship. And then a 5K Modern Trial as well. So that's super exciting. And then in June, we're back here in Mundelein, Illinois for our next event, which will be pulled up here. I believe this is our Legacy one, which is pretty exciting. So we have the Modern 10K and then Legacy 5K, Dom. That is hype.
Yeah, a lot of Legacy fans out there, very vocal community, very passionate community, and I'm sure they will be thrilled to have a 5K in their neck of the woods if you're around the Chicago area. Very easy to get to, and yeah, I'm sure that one is going to be very competitive.
Yep. Legacy players always come out for their events. There's so few big events for Legacy in paper. It looks like Jesse's bowling down to 5 here. If you're a Jesse Robkin fan, don't worry. Jesse can very easily win off 4 cards. I actually played a team tournament with her once where, she mulliganed to 4 multiple times, including our round 1, and just won the game on turn 3. It is sort of the power of this Jeskai Breach deck. So Jesse knows that these mulligans are A, her best way to win, right? She needs to actually have hands of function, and B, her deck can win on these mold of 4s, on these mold of 5s. So, I don't think she's one of the mold of 3 yet, but there's always a first time for everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you have Tomon Ragavan and it doesn't get removed, that can undo a lot of work, or Expressive Iteration, Urza Saga, a lot of cards which represent more cards by themselves or can just win the game by themselves.
Yeah. We do see Jesse here leaning back in her chair. Makes me wonder, is this a moment where she's got an awkward 5 and she's going to keep, or is she thinking, do I need to have a 4 to actually beat Gerrick here? As it does look like she's going to put back 2 and keep the hand she was dealt. With a Arid Mesa and a passing the turn, with the Scalding Tarn passing back, the players are going to play quickly. Probably about 6-ish minutes left on the clock here. It looks like it's actually 4 minutes. I was wrong, because the team events tapped and a passing of the turn to Gerrick. Gerrick's going to fetch, probably picking up a Triumph. Who really knows, though?
Yeah, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
The Ragavan Triumph you would expect from a Azoria / Jeskai control deck. None of this Rafine's Tower into Ketrio Triumph nonsense. Just keeping it simple here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And we're going to see a Flooded Strand passing back here. Gerrick knows that a lot of Jesse's most powerful plays against him cost about 3 mana. So if he wants to stop her, he is going to need to, hold up his counterspell this turn and maybe buy some time for Jesse to have to either double spell or, run into the counterspell when she's low on resources.
Getting our shuffle on here. The joy of fetch lands for coverage, as always, gives us time to just talk about ourselves, Mason. Talk about our lives.
Every day I'm shuffling. As Urza Saga comes down, that's a big one. That's going to allow Jesse to play underneath these counterspells as Flooded Strand is fetched. And I love to talk about myself, It makes me wonder, why aren't they talking more about us, Dom,
Yeah, more and more people are talking about us, in fact.
Mm-hmm. As we do see the Zagoth Triumph fetch for Gerrick, that's going to turn the Leyline Bindings back onto 1 mana. Leyline Binding, huge all-star in Modern over this past year. As Narset Party Veils is slammed, Jesse slams the Spell Pierce. She is not losing that card again.
And now Jesse has the initiative. Can maybe you want to be activating a contract this turn, but we'll see if there's a more high-impact play instead. So here's Springleaf Drum into Emry. Okay. And sort of mana up potentially for another Spell Pierce for something else.
Didn't hit any artifacts off the mill there. We got Underworld Breach, Prismatic Ending, 2 lands, it looks like. So Jesse might have the combo from hand, but she is missing that 0 mana artifact if she has the Grinding Station and the Breach. Luckily, her Saga will find that, as we do see a Leyline Binding coming down, costing only 1 mana. We do have Domain due to the Eld Triumph action. It looks like Jesse has something in hand because she has the Springleaf Drum. Looks like she's floating a mana. This could be a wear tear situation, as Teferi Time Raveler is being cast. And it looks like we just, we floated the mana, we moved to main phase 2. Jesse didn't want to do anything. And it looks like we unsummoned the Urza Saga construct. It's the Urza Saga that way no construct tokens can be made to pressure the Teferi.
So what can Jesse do? Urza Saga going to get replayed? That's an easy one to start with. Although I guess iteration first. Maybe if we hit a different land drop off there, that will change the calculation.
Yeah, she might just hit an Urza Saga there and want to make those constructs instead. Pretty reasonable spot to be. It looks like she has a Ledger Shredder as one of the cards and a land, it looks like to me, as the back card. Can't figure out the middle card. I'm going to guess Prismatic Ending. Oh, his Grinding Station was one of the cards. Okay, that's one of Jesse's combo cards, and we know it's important to her for winning. So if she's exiling it and she doesn't have the mana to cast it, it makes you wonder what's in her hand.
And Expressive Iteration, very good sometimes at getting you out of these spots. You're drawing you more cards, getting back resources. But sometimes, you don't have much to work with. You hit a 2-drop that you can't cast. You kind of have to exile it, and you get 1 card, but it's not even a great card. And the iteration is not getting you out of that problem.
Yeah, Gerrick here plays a Polluted Delta, passes back after brainstorming with Jace. We might see Gerrick very quickly start taking this Jace up to actually win the game here. We are going to put the Grinding Station underneath the graveyard. That way we know it's exiled permanently now. Not accidentally on the board. Can kind of look like a tap station. Obviously, no one would do that, but, for you at home. And Dom, this is really weird where Jesse sort of seems to have most of the things for winning, but just can't quite win yet, as we do see Prismatic Ending tapping out to kill the Teferi 3.
Yeah, despite the Prismatic Ending for 5 that we saw earlier, that's usually not on the table here. So Jace going to remain uncontested, going to be, looks like just brainstorming every turn for Gerrick, getting him the tools he needs to really cement control over this game.
If you're Gerrick, are you going to start ticking up on the Fate Seal ability, or are you going to just keep brainstorming? Looks like Gerrick's Fate Sealing.
All right, up to 5. Here we go.
Yeah. Big one against the Urza construct tokens, too. And put a Missy past the turn. Jesse toggle to 2. And looks like... Yeah, it looks like we got some background noise there. Hopefully the stream can't hear nobody. But looks like Jesse's tanking.
I personally love the ambient noise of a tournament hall, you know, where you're just sitting there and you hear just like this indistinct chatter just all around you. I don't know, it makes me feel at home.
That's fair. Just fantastic Expressive Iteration. Yeah, they can hear our fearless leader Norm if that's the case. You know, doing his thing, making everything happen. The owner of NRG also helps run our production. You know, big believer in competitive Magic, wants to support it, as you can too by clicking that follow button on Twitch. You haven't already. Jesse, big tanking on the Expressive Iteration. Sort of took this turn to try and find pieces. Does find another grinding station. A lot of open mana, but even if this gets countered, you know, Underworld Breach could rebuy it later in the game.
So the station is in. The best card in the deck, Mason.
Yes. Yeah, grinding station. It looks like. Okay, so we've been informed there was a judge call at the beginning, like we saw with the Rest in Peace. We thought we had updated that. We were wrong in the life total. So while we are low on time, we have about 7 minutes left in this game. So that is kind of why the players are playing maybe a little slower than you would expect. If there was 2 to 3 minutes left, like we said before, that's our bad there. You know, Gerrick at the beginning of the game did accidentally have their sideboard card in his hand, but it's all been fixed, and we are playing the game out from here. As Jace the Mind Sculptor did tick up, left a card on top, and Jesse just fetched away. Like, well, if you want me to have it, I don't want to have it.
So Jace on 7, pretty imposing there. And it's like, well, if Jace is ticking up, that's a bad sign, is getting ever closer to winning the game. Also suggests Gerrick feels kind of has all he needs. Doesn't need any more stuff, doesn't need to brainstorm towards anything. Has it locked up on paper, if not in practice just yet.
Yeah, and this is sort of a, like we said before, a big sign of dominance. And answer the grinding station. Jesse can sort of win from the graveyard with Underworld Breach. That Urza Saga popping here will allow her to grab a 0, which, you know, could potentially start the chain. But like you just said, Dom, if Gerrick's not brainstorming and there is more time, like we had talked about, that means he probably feels pretty comfortable against the Breach. So Jesse's got to figure out some way to work through this problem presented to her.
Out of Unholy Heat range now, if that card is even still on the deck. So yeah, it's going to be difficult to get that Jace off the board, but I don't know if going around it, trying to ignore it is a viable plan either.
Yeah, it's really hard too when Gerrick's also controlling your draw steps, right? Like if the plus was just doing something innocuous, it doesn't matter, then fine. But Jesse just knows her draw steps are going to be worse than her average ones due to things like this Jace the Mind Sculptor. And now Jesse's having to tank. Am I going to fight with constructs, or am I sort of going to forego this value in exchange for having more mana this turn? That's a big part of this breach deck. You know, when you're playing this deck, sometimes it might be tempting to always get your contract value, but other times you just have to know when you can't get that value and you can't play those games. Looks like Jesse tanking on what to find. She might grab like a Mishra's Bauble. Yeah, Mishra's Bauble. Sure. Yeah, it starts the chain off like we saw in game 1 for the combo and lets her get a redraw if she needs some new material.
I like that Kaheera has just been there vibing for, what, 10 turns at this point?
Yeah.
Don't need it, don't want it. It's just hang out, just a little guy.
Yeah, and every turn Jesse's like, you sure you don't want to grab the Kaheera? Garrick's like, oh, well, I already grabbed, I passed the turn, you know, I would. I don't have anything to do personally, no counter spells here, but...
But though in all seriousness, Kaheera and Jace is a combo of sorts in the sense of sometimes you just need a card you can raise them away, and Kaheera lets you put a blank piece of cardboard effectively into your hand.
Yeah, honestly, that's a combo, but it's also a nombo, Dom, because now your Kaheera needs to always be in the correct sleeve. So you see,
that's
it's like
that's the duality of man right there.
As we do see Jesse casting Underworld Breach using the floating mana from Urza Saga there. And it looks like we have Aether Gust cast. If you're Jesse, you're not happy to see a counter spell, but this is the one you're most happy.
Yeah, I mean, if it's Aether Gust, does that suggest there's no hard counter waiting in the wings for it next turn?
Maybe not. It might also just be a situation where Gerrick knows that, you know, he can tick up the Jace and bottom that Underworld Breach, and so it turns into a hard counter if Jesse can't answer the Jace itself. So,
although Mishra's Bauble would let Jesse redraw that before the Jace can get it.
Oh, great point. I totally missed that. Yeah, there might be it might be a situation, you're right, where there just is no other counterspell. Good.
In which case, maybe Jace has to suddenly reverse course and start brainstorming, but there's an answer. There's Chalice for 2.
Yeah,
starting off Underworld Breach and so much more, including some of Gerrick's own cards. But who needs counterspell when you don't need to care about Breach anymore?
Yeah, and you see Gerrick here. looked at the top card, took it away. Now Jesse has to find Wear Tear, but Wear Tear, I think, doesn't work into the Chalice of the Void.
Yeah, I guess so. Even if there's an enchantment there, does that work it up to 3 mana value? Or we need
I don't
a
know.
judge lore expert in the chat here.
Yeah, you can play Wear Tear in your Cascade decks, right? Because its mana value
You
is
can.
3. So I wonder if the Fuse will work. We have judges on site. If that comes up, it comes up. Maybe Twitch chat can inform us. They're always right about everything, Dom, so they're going to know.
That would be a flashy finish to this game. Where they're getting the Chalice and the Leyline Binding, unlocking the Breach to close out the game.
Yeah, that would be spicy. Also, this Jace the Mind Sculptor is at 13. The players are going to be pretty close on time now. A couple minutes ago, we mentioned they did have a time extension for the judge call at the start of the round, but time ever marching forward, the existential dread of the universe, and we're going to be getting close to that time here as Jesse fetches up a nice little Kamigawa Mountain. What's your thoughts on the Kamigawa Mountains, Dom?
I like those. I'm partial to the original Kamigawa basic lands. Those things are beautiful. Takes me back to when I started playing. But these, I think it's Ukiyo Woodprint basics. I mean, those are all timers as well. Those are phenomenal.
Yeah, I bought a bunch of the Snowy Mountain. That was my favorite. It reminded me of a calm little village. Very anti-red, Force a negation here, pitching a dress down, holding up mana. Definitely a bad sign if you're Jesse. If he's pitching there, you're in a bad spot. As we do see the Jace the Mind Sculptor Ultimate, Jesse has 3 cards in hand. Those 3 cards need to be good enough. Jesse does have an Underworld Breach, I think, in those 3 cards, but it could be a situation where she's maybe was waiting on a Wear Tear to go through. I'm not sure, but we'll have to see what she can do here.
Yeah, as long as that Chalice is there, I think most of the obvious routes to win the game are off limits. So we mentioned Chalice for 0 and Chalice for 1 as 2 pretty good options. Turns out Chalice for 2 may be the coup de grace in this game.
Yeah, I think it's going to be. Even if you Chalice check, what's the odds that, Gerrick misses both modes of it? Also, with the deck Exile, we might just not have the ability to go the distance. And it looks like Gerrick remembers the Chalice trigger. And congratulations to Gerrick Alford winning round number 2, starting 2-0, defeating Jesse Robkin, one of our players who made it to the finals of our championship last year and dominant player our circuit. Congratulations to Gerrick here. Not someone who is unfamiliar with our events. Definitely here a bunch and making some pretty deep runs, playing the Azorius control decks and other control decks like that. But what a fun round, Dom.
Yeah, Gerrick, maybe enough time for just one celebratory swig of water or granola bar or something before we move swiftly on to round 3 here. Round 3, I mean, maybe we'll just get another control deck in here for the full 50 minutes. Maybe we'll get a backup match. I'm hoping we get at least one of those today.
Yeah, we do have backup matches ready, so don't worry. Eventually, we're going to have something that isn't control. We've just been running into this so far, and hey, we have some more exciting modern decks coming to you. Speaking of grabbing some water granola bar, Dom, I think we should do that. Let's take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back for some more Magic in just 2 minutes.